forgotten to do that. Okay.
Jackson and I, did I?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to.
And take your hood down so we can see how it's doing. Jackson, come this way a little bit for our video camera.
Yeah, over here a little, Ted, just so who's ever going to speak, so they'll be able to see you in that corner. Who's ever going first?
I'll speak first. Let me just
Yeah, be next to the camera.
Jackson and I did a presentation on biography. Biographies in the beginning. Biographies written in the 17th and 19th century were religious based due to the Puritan era. Biographers believe that these biographies should be pulled for religious, political, or social education. Okay. Consequently, many pre-20th century biographies reflected the belief that literature should face children of souls. In the early 1900s, the contributions of female and non-white Americans were either not highly regarded or considered too controversial. This belief caused very few women, African Americans, and Native Americans to be great about cultural changes. During the late 1960s and 1970s, traditional social, family, personal values were changing. A new kind of openness to real-life situations were experienced. Divorce, African American, and women roles all began to come to the forefront that we're talking about publicly for the first time. Evaluating biography. Biography should avoid negative stereotypes based on race, gender, ethnicity, physical ability.
I just wanted to add that that's a big change to how it was in the beginning of the 17th and 19th centuries, because the biographies were honestly very biased, and they weren't. The biographers didn't do it with an open mind. They did it based on their beliefs, not of the actual facts of the person they were writing about.
And many of us, at least I know I grew up in a time where, racial issues were not addressed, women's issues or people infamous in women's rights, and you just didn't address those things. And a lot of the biographers, like George Washington, cutting down a cherry tree, those were things that they're not true, but they were actually sensationalized about him. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Jackson. That's a great point, because a lot of what you're going to read in the older biographies are skewed a little bit, trying to make, like Abraham Lincoln, a lot of what his personal life was and the bad that he does, and many of our politicians weren't there. It was only the good things.
And I feel like that's a good, it's nice that we grow up in the time we do now, that we live in, that we're exposed to all the facts of actually what happened.
So be careful when you are choosing biographies for your classroom, that you do check the information on that person, because sometimes, they're biased one way or the other. It could be negative biases or positive. Thank you, Jackson. Great point.
Characterization. The most important element in biography, obviously, would be characterization. That's because the biography is centered around one or more people, and when you center a story around a person, when they grow, their character changes. So characterization is a big part. Author Virginia Hamilton believed that characterization in biography was those non-known facts of life. Factual accuracy. Biographies have special responsibilities to be accurate and authentic in characters and settings. Extensive research should use scholarly works and historical journals. Often mention research in historical society, newspapers, diaries, and letters. Worthiness of subject. The subject of biography should be worth reading about. However, the subject does not have to be famous, but their lives must relay some sort of lesson about people in society. Subjects should be displayed in a believable way. Jean Brix is a well-known author of historical biography for young children.
Yeah, Gene Fritz is an important person to remember when we're going over the questions and stuff. Talking about how the subject of the biographies need to be interesting so that, especially children, you need to be able to draw them in and make them want to learn about the person that they're talking about in class. So with good biographies and good picture books and different types of illustrations, that makes the child more interested in what they're learning about.
There are numerous biographies written as picture books. The subject, setting, and the times are reflected in the illustration. These illustrations supplement textual information by providing details about the program. Joanna Bruce Long provides several guidelines for evaluating illustrated biographies. Style and visual reference should be appropriate for the intended audience. Pictorial motives should suit the text. The author and illustrator should provide sources.
And just that first point is kind of making the point that, you know, you want to have a biography that is suitable for whoever you're trying to teach, like the person that you're talking about. So if you're trying to teach to children like in kindergarten through 5th grade, you want more illustrations and you want fewer words, just more things for them to really understand the main points of the person. But then as you get older, of course, you want a little bit more factual evidence and a little bit more text-based books.
John, is it Malone?
Yeah.
Man. John Malone's Beatrix Potter includes photographs of the author and her family and illustrations from her most famous work, Peter Rabbit. When the illustration provides this type of detail and impressive light, it is important to evaluate them critically.
This is important because this is one of the first books, at least, when an author is writing about another author, and it also includes a lot of her illustrations. So it's a little bit more centered for kids too, so that you know, when reading about the person, that they can expose the children to Beatrix Potter, her work with Peter Rabbit, and he can include her illustrations and stuff in order for the children to be more engaged in the book itself.
I don't got a pretty good example of picture book regarding to the piece, what you know about Alice and Planted Tree.
So Wangari's Trees of Peace is a biography based off of a young woman actually in Kenya, who, of course, her planting trees to there was a just her planting trees in Kenya and her developing the agricultural agriculture in Kenya. And then What to Do About Alice is about Franklin Roosevelt's daughter, Alice, who, and it talks about her story about the things that she did around the White House during his term. And then I included, it's the same book, but I just wanted to include it just to show the illustrations, just to show that, because it's by 2 different authors, but the illustrations in both of these books are really, really good. So. All right, so biographical subjects. So this is when we're getting into like topics of biographies. So we're starting off with explorers of Earth and space, people who question existing boundaries and explore the unknown, fascinates children and adults alike. These biographers differ in literary style, focus, amount of detail, and development of character. An example of this would be Demi's Marco Polo. You know, early people. Like in the 17th and 19th centuries, the children, of course, you know, you need to be able to teach this to them, but in a way that you can engage them. So, and people like this fascinate children because, I mean, the stories it's our history, it's the history of our world. So it's very important to make sure that we have biographies that are interesting for kids and adults so that they can learn about the times of their life. Demi is an author who wrote about Marco Polo, she provided a biography of a 13th century explorer who traveled 33,000 miles as he explored lands from Venice, Italy to Beijing, China, and an introduction to the art of the various cultures he explored. So this is just an example of someone who, you know, his work, you have to make it intriguing for the child. So someone like Marco Polo, the illustrations and things like that are really is what is going to draw the child in. So she did a really nice job in this book, just including a lot of illustrations for younger children so they could learn about Marco Polo. All right, this is a different subject that's common among biographies, is political leaders and social activists. These are men and women who have achieved noteworthy political power or have attempted to bring about social change. This is the most common subject in biographies are mostly about political leaders and social activists. Sometimes biographers create an unbalanced portrait of their subjects because these figures can be controversial. So that's why, again, that's why you should do research on who you're doing, the author, and, just make sure what you're reading is actual facts instead of just what the biographer's opinion is about the person or if they're scared to say something about, because these can be controversial subjects just based on our history. This is an example of a social activist in Russell Freeman's Confucius, the Golden Rule. So he talks about Confucius and his teachings and how it influenced millions of followers. Again, like Marco Polo, he does this book to draw in his audience instead of just throwing text at them, making sure he includes plenty of illustrations, which I believe is a really important part of biographies, especially with young children. This is another subject that's really common is founding fathers and mothers of America. So in these books, the children discover that heroes like themselves, they have fears, they display good and bad characteristics, and they're liked and disliked by others. Carl Sandburg is an important name. He's probably the most well-known biographer of Abraham Lincoln. He wrote Abe Lincoln Grows Up, and he talks about how children vicariously share the youth of a great American leader. And so these are the examples of his two books. So he wrote a book, Abraham Lincoln in the Prairie Years and the War Years, and then he wrote about Abraham Lincoln Grows Up. So this one would be more based for adults, and then this one he created also for children to kind of get a good understanding of Abraham Lincoln's life. All right, and then this is another subject that's very common is 20th century leaders in America and abroad. So biographies written for young children and for older children, they can differ in tone and focus, in the choice of content, amount of detail. Biographies about political leaders and social activists in the 20th and 21st centuries provide opportunities to compare authors' techniques and the content that they include. So some examples here. Civil rights leaders, that's another, that kind of goes along with social activists. Just talking about how civil rights leaders encourage readers to examine historical, political, and social perspectives. An example is Emily Patterson's Martin Luther King Jr. and the Freedom Movement. She talks about the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, 1956, and his involvement in it. And on the next one, so these are some examples. These are the two books that are written about Martin Luther King, and these are a little bit for older, readers. So again, he's just talking about his life and just the countless number of things he did for the civil rights movement that were very crucial. And then this is an example of Thurgood Marshall, who was the first African-American Supreme Court justice, just talking about his life. And Malcolm X, who was another very important civil rights activist. So these books are all very important because before really, I mean, even like the 1960s, you didn't get these kinds of factual information about these people because, or about people before them because a lot of it was biased. So it's good now that we have authors that can actually tell you firsthand what actually happened and how important these people were.
And also the research that they did too is very important, and you do have to double check to make sure their sources were accurate and all that. But some of them didn't live during that time, but they researched and talked to people who knew and did a lot of things. So yes, research is important.
And then another topic is people who have persevered. So we talked about a lot of famous people in our history, but biographies don't always have to be written about people that are famous, just had great material success. So some excellent biographies and autobiographies, they portray courage and perseverance of ordinary people. So ordinary people as in the Native Americans, and then just citizens that have overcome racial discrimination in the past, and also Holocaust survivors that may not have been noted in history, but they all have a story to tell. So their biographies about their life is just as important as anyone else because they experienced this kind of persecution firsthand. And these are some examples. So Sky is about a Native American girl who experienced a great flood in 1964. That's very historical on her reservation. So that's very important for Native American. Again, it's not a girl that you know in history, but that time is very important. And then We Are the Ship, the story of Negro League Baseball. Negro League Baseball is a very untold story because it really didn't get a lot of publicity when it was happening. But I mean, you got some of the greatest players to play baseball from that league. So it's very important that their stories are told and you learn about them and what they did during their time. And then No Pretty Pictures, A Child of War is about a Holocaust survivor who was born in Poland, and Nazis invaded her house when she was 5. She was lucky enough to actually escape to America in her teen years, but she just talks about her experience and firsthand about what happened when the Nazis took over. So that's a very, very good book. All right, so now we're getting to how do you teach with biographies. So children often find biographies and other information more exciting than textbooks, just due to the amount of pictures and illustrations and just limited text instead of just reading paragraphs and paragraphs. Librarians and teachers indicate that biographies are among the most used genres of literature when students are searching for sources for school reports. Just because biographies, honestly, they cut to the chase and they provide solid information on the person that you're researching, and also just give a good synopsis of their life in a short amount of text. So that's why it's so popular.
And another thing too, Jackson, is people like to read more on personal experiences. So we actually get to read the history through Martin Luther King's personal experience with it. So we're more interested in that rather than reading 1940 to 1952. I don't know any dates of anything, but his life and his history and what occurred during that historical civil rights movement time is what sticks with people.
Yeah, and a lot of the authors that are the authors of these biographies have spoken to these people firsthand, so they're a lot more of a credible source to talk about these people when they've actually experienced it with them or talked to them about it. So
that's a very good point.
Developing hypothetical interviews with authors. So this is an activity that teachers use for students when talking about biographies. So it's a reader response activity that is common. They develop hypothetical question and answer interviews between students and authors. So they ask the students to read the interviews critically and to respond to the questions and answers found in them. And then timelines are another very important part of biographies. They help the student understand sequence of events, of years that have happened before them, because obviously children don't have a gauge of what years it happened, especially in the 1900s. They don't understand. So it's so putting timelines out there for children is very important, so they can follow along with their lives and follow along with important events that happened and know what years they actually happened. So an example is if studying World War II, you may use biographies such as Russell Freeman's Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, A Life of Discovery. And then by reading these biographies and creating timelines, the children are developing comprehension skills, which is the most important part about biographies, is just being sure that they can comprehend and have comprehension skills about the topics that they're talking about. Do you have any questions?
Are you guys want to teach? Are you doing education?
Yeah.
You should. Very educational, I think. But Jackson, you just right up there. Good job. Shows. I'm gonna. Y'all gonna remind me better. We'll pause our recording for a moment while we go over the answers.
All right, this is our informational books.
Okay, share screen. Can you share screen? 'Cause I can't see your screen. If you scroll to the bottom, you can see a share screen. That's perfect. Perfect, perfect, okay?
This is chapter 12, and this is the informational books. It's by me, Natasha, and Tamia. There are multiple values in informational books. We have multiple uses for them. We all basically use them, even if we don't know. A lot of times, our car manuals have information in them, so they're considered it. Informational books, like even like the how-to books for dummies, those are considered informational books as well. There's multiple like ranges for them, but they're all basically to gain about a subject or gain knowledge about a certain thing. There's multiple ways that we can use it in teaching also, like the scientific method, where we teach out to children and help them get introduced by the scientific community with these books. It also helps the children stretch their minds and curiosity, helps them also develop their observational skills. It also helps children learn about values, beliefs, and lifestyles that are different from their own. Yeah, so I said that children start to learn about their values and beliefs different from their own. That's a big deal, idea of how the world works, and you get an understanding of how different aspects of the world come together, and everything's not the same as you already expected within your life. Stuff changes. They help with their vocabulary and expand their minds, and they're able to talk better and have a different understanding of different, more complex readings. But the biggest thing informational books provide for kids is the enjoyment of reading. So they'll be able to learn about a different subject they want to learn about and are interested in already. These are some of the informational books that we have: the National Geographic, See Inside Your Body, and The Animals in the Winter. They're all basically explaining certain things about animals in the winter, and then how to plant, and then basically how your body works. So these are just informational things that kids start to learn about or are interested in when they're very little. Well, there's different ways to evaluate the books. They're all basically from different standards of learning. So the National Science Teachers Association and the Advancement of Standard of Science. Those are the basic two governing bodies that made the what would need to be in books and what can't allow to be in these books. The accuracy of the books, are the authors able to actually write about the subject? Are they qualified? Are the facts and subjects are the same? Are they correct? There's no stereotypes allowed in any of these books whatsoever. There are some books that have some stereotypes in them, but they are not deemed as sexist or racial based. The illustrations have to be accurate, other than the organization of the book has to be correct, and the overall style of the book has to be over the age level, and the children still read it and understand it. These are the actual 6 events that need to be in each book, and they are actually provided. These are the actual 6 standards of it for the criticism of the informational books. And the history and culture of the books. Well, informational books help teach history and culture about past and present civilizations to children with the help of pictures and illustrations. Parents use these informational books to help explain their culture of their homeland and where they grew up, so that children that don't experience that will be able to. We also explore ancient and modern day civilizations throughout this, and so children can learn and expand their minds towards learning those. And cultures can be taught to children from reading books on different levels, called different cultures. So basically, you can learn about different culture even if you didn't grow up.
The purpose of informational books and connecting with nature. Like it helps children understand themselves and animals and their environment which they live in. And like when kids grow up like to a certain age, probably like 6 or 7, they want to learn more about the environment and more interested in animals and their own bodies and how things work. It's easier for when you try to teach children about their body, animals, and the environment. It's easier for them to understand by using diagrams or help them see illustrations to show what's important about the body and the animals and their environment. And information books can help children understand about research to help them. Hold on, wait a minute, I messed up. Sorry. Informational books can help children understand about, it's different for each child because, at different ages they learn things differently. Like for one age group, they can learn through diagrams, and the other one can learn by like coloring, like the heart or something, and understand the importance of their body or their environment. You can also use informational books to help them understand history and how things are discovered. Like there's informational books used to help them understand like the past and how things work now as the, present day too. Like help them understand that George Washington was the first president or, something like that. And they can use that by like before I said, using diagrams and illustrations and using step-by-step direction books like how-to books. Children also can use informational books. Children can also understand more with informational books. Because informational books can have arts and crafts. As they learning, they could probably like read one page and then color the next page with what they just previously had read. It makes them appreciate art more when they do learn that way, and it helps them open their minds out to certain interests that they might have. And it also helps them enjoy reading books and learning while they're, reading or whatever. And here's some examples of some arts and craft books and how-to books, like step-by-step books for kids. Yeah.
And while you all are switching up, one important thing about that was a great job, and you mentioned it too, is how important those books are to children. They love to read how-to, like the ones that she had up there, because it's interesting. It tells them how to do, particularly boys. We sometimes center our girls so much into the romance and the little fiction books, and boys don't like fiction so much as girls. Kind of a gender gap. We'll see one of our next questions on the discussion board deals with that gender gap in reading and why we have that gender gap. Our boys like to read biographies. They like to read these how-to books that Zia and Katasha and Brandon are talking about today. So pay particular attention to the kinds and be sure there are plenty in your classroom to all people.
Boys like to be able to read stuff and be like, actually like to process it and use it for something too.
You're exactly right. And remember this when we have our discussion on the discussion board about the differences in reading in boys and girls. There's a difference, there's a gap there in why maybe girls read earlier, read faster, enjoy reading more than boys. Because we're combining them with these books that they love to do. How-to books, and these biographies, true stories. Great point. Thank you. I'm not sure who was speaking. That was a great point.
Teaching with the help of informational books. Teaching with the help of informational books, allows the child to understand information from a different perspective, more so simple perspective. The information books includes the truth of whatever subject that aligns with the cognitive learning for the children to comprehend. we have to kind of break it down so they'll understand and use the context that is easier for whatever age group. Students can find further information that will help them to dig further into more facts about history by looking in the back of the book. Most informational books provide additional books that relates to the information that's documented. Also, the terminology that the book may contain can sometimes be difficult for the child to understand. So the glossary will help the child to understand the technical terminology so they can continue learning about history without being confused. The author's informational books make it a priority for the children to get a complete idea of the subject of the matter. Examples like pictures, the glossary for the science vocab, and additional books to extend the knowledge of the history, whether it's plants, animals, the anatomy of the body, whatever else that connects to that.
Right. And it's important too that they're all accurate, like she said. The pictures are accurately done, because a lot of times they'll give models of how to do it, and you follow the model. So it's a great point there that it has to be accurate.
And we can go on and do the questions now too.
Thank you.
Hold on 1 second, Brandon. I'm going to pass it out.
I couldn't read the first one.
So go ahead and hit stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing. Yeah, so we can see.
Oh, yeah, let me, I'm going to pause the recording. Somebody pass it out. Let me pause the recording a minute. Thank you. My baby's over here reminding me. Okay. Thank you, Brayden. One other thing I want to talk about, on April the 24th, I'm going to be away at that meeting that I told you Dr. Roberts and I are serving on a big meeting in the presidents. So I will be away in Richmond on the 24th as well, 23rd and 24th. So we will not have class the 24th. So I'm glad it came in, I forgot about that. So no class on April the 24th. So what I did, if you'll look on your Blackboard website real quick while the groups were talking today, I kind of got on there and tried to set up, most of you have set up your read aloud project already, but if you were scheduled on the 24th, we need to make a change with that. So I've changed it around a little bit and moved you to the day of the exam. So what I'm going to do is relating to Dan at Daniel campus and this campus. The exam is May 1st or May 3rd. I'm not sure which date, but I'm going to do Christiana May 1st here, and I'm going to go to Keysville on that Thursday, and the exam will be May 3rd. And I will finalize the time, but I do want everybody on Daniel campus to be sure. But I believe it's at 11 o'clock, but I'm going to have to look at the exam schedule. But I did post that. Now, anybody who wants to present their presentation, have already done your video presentation and wants to present earlier, feel free to. But right now, everyone's scheduled up. But on Daniel campus, I don't know if you've got your computers on that you can look real quickly. But the exam takes about 30 minutes. And again, the exam, I pull 5 or 6 questions out of each chapter from those 10 most important ones. So if you study each chapter, important questions, you can't not get 100. Because the answers are going to be there. I'm just going to pick and choose 6 or 7 from every chapter, and of the most important questions. So start studying the day we don't have class. Start looking over, getting all your most important questions together so that you know, and you'll have your study guide for that. It'll be very simple, very easy. It maybe takes you 20 minutes if you study, because you know as soon as you start reading the question, you know that's C. You know that's B because you've already looked through them. So the only other thing after we do the presentation, usually about 30 minutes in, I will stop and let, on the exam, after 30 minutes, we'll start giving presentations. Get the presentations. If you still haven't finished your exam, you'll have time after the presentations or during them to complete it. But I want to give about 30 minutes of quiet time for the exam, and then we start presenting. If anybody wants to go early, and let me go over to my share screen real quick. If I don't even think I can share my screen. Not Michelle's screen. I don't think I can do it right now because I don't have mine up. I don't have my Blackboard up. But everybody look. If you want to go April the 10th, anybody who wants to schedule, I'm going to sit over here a minute. Right now, probably Precious, Taisha, Kashayla, and Lindsay. And I can take anybody else, the Daniel campus that wants to go early. You've already done it. Go ahead and let's do it, and you don't save it. Basically, all you do is show your video. Tell us a little bit about what you did and who you went to and what you learned about it, and then share your video with us. You know, it should be not over 10 minutes. 10 minutes of just the read along and that type of thing. You know, I have some of those videos online. You can already look at some of those videos if you're not sure what to do. There's some already modeled out there for you to look at. We looked at one in class the other day. And I've heard so many nice things. Some principals have already started contacting me and love supporting SVCC functions and tickled and have already asked people to come back. So please go back. Anybody want to move to April 10th? Katie, you want to move to April 10th? Okay. But now, you know, next week we won't have class, so we start our presentations on April the 10th. Anybody else like to move to April 10th? I can take anybody from Daniel campus too. You'll just have to upload your video like you did your PowerPoint. Does everyone know how to save it as a YouTube video? Huh? As a YouTube video? Basically, you just go to your Googles. You go to Google. Let me share my screen again. It's basically all. On your email address, you just go to Google. I got to get over here to it. Put this down. Right there, that little box right there says Google. Let me move this down so it's out of my way. It says YouTube. And you'll just click into this video, create a video. And most of you already have video accounts or have a YouTube account. If you don't have an account, all you do is just put your name in there and create a password and a name, just like you do every other sort of thing. And then you just upload the video. And once you upload the video, then you'll save that video on your jump drive or just upload it on the Blackboard, wherever you choose to save it. If you want to save it on the desktop, you can save it. You don't, you just save it onto your USB. That's what I do in here. I save all the videos on the USB, carry it back to my office, upload it onto YouTube. It gives me a link, and that link I post online. That's where you get your YouTube link, and all you do is press into it. And I will be glad to post those for you online, so if it's easy access to it and you want to show it. A lot of people put that video inside of a PowerPoint with pictures and things like that of the art project, and sometimes the students. Now, a lot of times you're not allowed, we've said this a zillion times, you're not allowed to do this to film the students unless there's permission. But I'm not interested in you filming the students. I just want to just be sure that you say, I'm going to just have the camera on me and me reading, because that's what I will judge, and that's how I base my, you know, how well that you did. And it's not hard to make 100 on that. You just got to go do it. You know, pick a good book, make sure the children are engaged, and you have to have that little follow-up project, and that's it. Easy 100. It's just the trouble of going to do it is the stress of it. But once you do it, it's great. So, but go right there, upload your video, and I don't have a video right now that I can upload, but that's how you do it. And then you get, it will give you a link, and then you just save it onto whatever you want to save it on. Okay, questions about the video in any way or how to upload a YouTube video? That's, by the way, if you don't know how, there are tons of YouTube videos on how to upload a video and how to create a YouTube video. So go to YouTube and look it up. Y'all look up everything else in the world on YouTube. And but that's basically our television anymore. We look at everything off YouTube. So it's good to know how to do that technology wise. All right. So anybody want to move forward? I'm gonna take Katie off. She's going out. Anybody want to go on the 10th? Does anyone want, particularly Daniel, want to go on the 17th? So we'll move from May 1st. Brandon, Jackson, Marquise, Daniel, Tyler, Dylan over here on May 1st. And you all want to move up to April 17th. Tyler, you do? Okay. That saves the time, Tyler. Okay. Anybody else want over here? Anybody over Daniel want to move up? You can just show it over there and talk about it. But send me the link though. Anybody want to go Daniel campus the 10th or the 17th? No. Okay. Then what I will do is everyone at Daniel. I don't know if I'll get to all those people. If it's 10 of you, it's going to be a long time showing videos. So if in any way possible, it would be good to show it early. So think about that on the 10th or the 17th.
I can do the 17th. This is Carla.
Brian, that works perfectly. All right, Carla. Anybody else? The 10th or the 17th? It's 2-3 weeks away. And it counts 20 points, so you know it's big. It's a big thing. Thank you. Oh, all right, Tanisha's doing that. Anybody want to go to 10?
So are you just doing people on that end, or are you gonna do on our too?
You guys can go as well. Yeah, early. Anybody can go early. That's just the deadline. The 3rd. Anybody April 10th? All right, well, I'm going to leave it as is now. So then my suggestion is to prepare to stay longer than the 2 hours for exam, because it takes 10 minutes and I've got to go through 10 presentations plus the 30-minute exam. That's going to be a lengthy day. I'm sorry about that April 24th. I had a lot of things scheduled for that day and I had to move you, but I just remember that meeting in Richmond. That's kind of the hang up for the April 24th day. But let me know if you want to go. So that's except for Carla, so that means about 9 people will be going on May 3rd. But I'm going to finalize that May 3rd once I look at the exam schedule, okay? And I'll send out another email if it changes. Unless you do. All right, is everybody good? Okay, that's it for today. I think I've covered everything. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, guys. Class is dismissed. Yes.
April 17th too.
April 17th, who's this?
This is Tamia.
Tamia, okay. I'll put you right down now while I'm thinking about it. Thank you, Tamia. Love you. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we should, I'm not sure we'll get to everybody, but Cole, no, it was like, oh, it's cold. Ashley, Tiana,
Right there.
Well, I got my presentation.
You have to sign it on your email, but then. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you like plug your phone in with the charger, and then you your USB record.
Carla, you couldn't go to 10th, could you?
That's what I do.
Yes, ma'am, I can change. I'm supposed to
That's just so that you're not, I don't want to press you though. Have you already done it?
No, I'm doing it tomorrow, actually.
Oh, you'll be excited then. Yeah.
I'm nervous more than excited.
Everybody is, but you know what? The kids don't know that.
I guess.
No, they don't. And everybody's, I'm so nervous. I said, the children will never know it. They just love having you there.
Okay, yeah, I'll change to the 10th.
Oh, wonderful. That saves me from, and if we, too, Carl, I want to remind you on the exam day, if y'all don't meet on the 1st.
Oh, okay.
Your day will be the 3rd, whatever that Thursday is.
I think that's what you had on the,
Yeah, on the thing, just making sure you knew it was not, your exam days will be different. You don't have to come on the 1st, you do it, but I'll finalize all that. Hey. Thank you, dear. Let me hold on, we cut off the record. Yes, Charlie, you can come. Thank you, dear.